presentation. Well, welcome to Black History Conversations. We're just getting started here now, and I can see Jackie Pennant jumping around on the screen. That's great to see you, Jackie. Lovely. Okay, so we're just going to introduce ourselves, and then we're going to go ahead to start the session that we've got planned for today to start off season 10 of Black History Conversations. It's really quite amazing what we've managed to do. So Garrett, could I ask you to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon or good morning for those in Jamaica, Vivian. It's morning, so good afternoon and good morning or good night, as we would say. So I'm calling in from the northwest of England, just across Liverpool in Cheshire. I'm a member of the North Wales Jamaica Society and also organization Justice for Windrush Generations.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Garrick. And Simon, I don't know if you're still there. If you are, please can you introduce yourself, but you might have had to nip out. Perhaps you've nipped out already. Okay, then. So thanks very much indeed, Garrick. That's absolutely brilliant. June Elizabeth, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's June Elizabeth, and I live in Northampton, and I'm a member of many organisations, and I am co-founder of Northampton Windrush organisation, and I'll close with one of my organisations. It's the Nurses Association of Jamaica, UK, and I did a charity swim last Thursday, and I've raised over £1,300.
Wow.
I'll just finish there. Yeah.
Elizabeth, thank you very much indeed. And just to say that June Elizabeth and Garrick are part of the Windrush International Allies Network, and we've together done quite a lot of things, and they support wholeheartedly this activity, the Black History Conversations, as does Vivian Crawford. Vivian, just tip your screen down a little bit so we can see what delights you've got to offer today. Any mangoes?
You drink it off.
Oh, okay, Vivian. Let's.
Evidence. The evidence is missing. I drank the evidence.
From time to time have had sessions where we've been sharing fruit and all kinds of things across the screen and across the parts of the world. Well, Vivian's disappeared now, but Vivian's oh, right, brought me something excellent.
What is
so
this?
That's a guava.
No.
It looks like a pear. It looks like a pear.
Yeah, but you call it avocado.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
It's massive, isn't it?
Yeah, very buttery inside.
Yes.
Well, we're delighted that you've joined us, Vivian. Vivian's a part of another activity we're involved in called the Penance Project, which is relevant to today. And Vivian was also, until quite recently, I think, Executive Director of the Institute of Jamaica.
Yes, Liz. Yeah, right.
Okay, so we're really grateful you're with us, and we know you're going to share things that link us with Jamaica. And one of the special things about Black History Conversations is that we do have people from all over the world. Our colleague Jackie Pennant, it's brilliant to have you with us, Jackie. And I'm sure you're going to remember some of the things that you saw at Penrhyn Castle when you visited Wales a few years ago now, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago, and I see you were just there recently, so exciting to hear what you discovered, anything new and so on. So,
okay, well, that's great. Jackie's joining us from Florida, so that's good. Walter Val's with us as well. Walter's joining us. He's a Rotarian from Maypen and active with the Penance Project that we'll tell you about in a bit. Are you there, Walter?
Oh, yes, I am, Liz.
Good to see you.
Yes, glad to see you too.
Lovely. Right. Well, we'll follow up with any other things with you, Walter. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. It's a bit early in the morning, 9 o'clock. Okay. All right. So next, I'm going to ask Lucy to introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. I live in the southwest of England in Exeter. I've moved there just recently, so I'm kind of adjusting to a new life. I've focused really on local work. In 2003, the Black Cultural Archives in London published a small booklet I wrote called Local Black History, A Beginning in Devon, which you can get online, although there's an important middle page missing, but there you go. And I work under the umbrella of an organisation locally called Devon Development Education, where I belong to the Windrush Group and also the Legacies of Devon Slavery Group. And I've become particularly interested in how we spread ideas, you know, the information that we have collected, how can those ideas be spread? And in the last year, I've helped, not as big as collaborated with, helped two singer-songwriters in England who have written, one is called Reg Muros. He's written a song cycle called Stolen from God. And I'm going to narrate that in Somerset this tomorrow night. And Angeline Morrison, who lives in Cornwall, has also done songs about, I think hers is called Songs of Sorrow. Both of these are obtainable. And I think what interests me is, you know what we're interested in. We learn a lot from each other, but I'm really interested in how that information gets out to others.
I'm delighted you've joined us, because this is...
It's great to be here.
Challenge for us all. And I'm also particularly interested that you're looking at local histories. You've looked in Devon. The work that I've been doing with colleagues has been about North Wales, and you're going to hear about some of it today. And I'm delighted to be joined by Martha Bottrus, great, from Colwyn Bay, North Wales. Lovely to see you, Martha. That's great. And we're also delighted that Rosemary Caldicott's joined us, and Rosemary's starting to tell us about the group she's involved in Bristol. So Rosemary, we'll just give you a few moments now to tell us a bit more about what you're involved in, and then we'll start the session properly.
Thank you. Yes, I was saying I'm secretary of Bristol Radical History Group. So we've, amongst many projects, of course, we were involved in trying to get a Colston statue removed in Bristol, which you all know that story. Personally, I've been researching for 3 years about a slave trade captain who came from Brecon in Wales during the late 17th century. He sailed on his ship, owned by the Royal African Company, of course, down to West Africa. And during the horrific voyage of the Middle Passage, it would appear that 324 souls were lost out of 700. Now, in 2010, Brecon Town Council decided to spend money on putting up a plaque to this amazing sea captain. The plaque failed to mention, of course, about the enslaved who died on a ship and the fact he was a slave trader. So I started a campaign to have this plaque removed. The weekend that Colston's statue ended up in Bristol Harbour, the plaque in Brecon, Wales was ripped off the wall and thrown into the nearby River Usk. I've been researching and writing a book about the voyage, also about modern day attitudes in towns like Brecon, Wales, where there still seems to be an ideology. Sadly, in this case, it's a Labour-controlled council that actually it's okay to spend money on commemorating people who, were involved in atrocities such as Captain Thomas Phillips. I've got a book coming out soon. It's being laid up at the moment with the graphic designers, all about this story, bringing it right to the present day. I've got an ongoing campaign to get the plaque, which was recovered, now contextualized in Brecon Museum. With the council, it would appear, are stonewalling this campaign and don't want it to go on display. So that's where I am at the moment. I'm fascinated by Welsh history and connection with you know, people for various reasons, you know, whose ancestors originated from other parts of the world. So I'm really pleased to be here today and meet you all. It's great.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. And we've got a lovely crew with us. We've also got Roland, but Roland often has real difficulties with the sound for introducing himself, but you're welcome to give it a go. And Coy Roach is also joining us from Jamaica. So we'll just wait until he appears, which might be shortly. But Rosemary, it's really interesting. I've followed up some of the information you sent me on email and been looking at this story, and I'm very fascinated by the challenge that you've got with the museum, and I'm also very interested in how museums are responding to Black Lives Matter and helping us to better share the ideas and the stories. You talked about this, Lucy, how we're going to share the understanding and the knowledge and keep on sharing it, because it's got to keep on going through the generations. Otherwise, we can do a project one time in one area of the country. For example, in Bewdley in Worcestershire, they did a really great study on the buildings in Bewdley, which is on the River Severn, that had connections with the slave trade in Bristol. But within 3 years, by the time I got back over there to go and talk to them and find out, by the way, I'm in Australia at the moment. I'll explain that again. So when I was in Worcestershire, I went to have a look to meet them, and I really struggled to find anyone, and the local museum hadn't got copies of the excellent walk that they developed for the town, and it was acknowledged by the council at the time, and yet it wasn't available. So quite a difficult one there. Right, okay then, Coy, welcome to you. I'm glad you're with us. Thank you very much indeed. Vivian, June Elizabeth, and Coy and I, with a couple of others, were meeting yesterday about the Penance Project. So it's good to see you here again. And I know it's a lot to ask you, do 2 meetings 2 days running. All right, well, I'm going to start the session now with the PowerPoint. If I can find where I've put it. Dear Lord heavens. Right, okay then. Well, at this moment in time, I'll explain that I'm in Australia, and it might be morning for you, or it might be afternoon, but it's the middle of the night for me. So when I fluff things up, then just forgive me, because it just takes me a minute or two to get things sorted around. But it's really nice to see you all. Right, before we start the formal presentation, we'd like to respect our colleagues who've joined us from Jamaica. Vivian, would you be happy to do a prayer for us? Because this is the tradition and the way of things in Jamaica before we start meetings.
Thank you very much. Let us pray. In reverence, we approach God, who is our maker, defender, redeemer, and friend. And in this consciousness, we place planet Earth before you, God. We remember especially those who mourn, they shall be comforted. We place this meeting into your hands. Guide our chair and us who will participate, that all we do will be to your glory. For yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Vivian.
Amen.
Right. Right, I'm just replying to a question, Lucy. Bewdley in Worcestershire is the place. Okay, so I'm just going to share the screen now, and I'm going to start the PowerPoint. All the things up here. So we're almost in Black History Month. This is Black History Conversations 365. Well, we don't have a conversation every single day, I have to confess, but we did manage after Black History Month started in 2020, after George Floyd's murder, and we'd seen Colston's statue thrown into the dock here in Australia, where I'm based at the moment. I watched that again and again because it kept being shown again and again, and it made a real impact. We have our challenges here as well. Now, for the North Wales Black History Month, Black History Work in Progress, that seemed to be a suitable way of describing what we're about, because now more than any other time we're really active. There's so much activity going on related to Black history and research with communities. So in the launch of season 10 of Black History Conversations, we're welcoming members of the North Wales Jamaica Society. We've got Garrick with us, we've got Martha with us, June Elizabeth, myself, with the focus on the story of the Jamaica Box, now displayed at Penrhyn Castle. Okay, so that's what we're going to be focusing on today. But I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which this session is being led today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And this is the norm for the beginning of any meeting here in Australia, or on the TV, they'll put the reference as a subtitle. Now, Jackie Pennant, you suggested to us that we also ought to have a wider acknowledgement, and on this occasion I'll read this. I acknowledge the injustice of the actions taken by the British and other European countries to invade and take possessions of the lands of the Caribbean islands, as well as the continents of North and South America. In addition, I recognise the horrors of the rape of Africa that destabilised these nations and the peoples of this great continent, and also many other parts of the world during the centuries of colonialisation. As you can see, this is draft 2. We welcome anybody else who would like to make a contribution, an acknowledgement, and we could use that as an alternative. Also recognising that we're still within the International Decade for People of African Descent, and if you are interested, you can watch on UN Web TV the last of the sessions that's posted on their site towards eliminating systemic racism and discrimination against peoples of African descent. So that's featured there. So what's the focus for today? Well, it's about the Jamaica Box. Okay, so I'm just going to stop sharing, and I'm just going to find the PowerPoint that fits with this. Oh, sorry. Oh dear, right. These moments when my computer decides to do what it wants. Garrick, I should have asked Simon to make you a co-host as well, because I can't watch the screen.
That would have been great. Yeah. Unfortunately, he has gone.
Right, Ivor's joining us now from
yeah.
And that's a really good point for future times.
Yes. Yes.
So welcome to Ivor. Right, okay, then let's find this next PowerPoint wherever it's hiding itself. on my system. There we are, it's not there. Choosing to be a bit difficult. Now this presentation that I'm going to show you now is a PowerPoint that I found, which it's stubbornly not opening, which I found on the internet, and I can't give any credit because it's there was no credit with it, so we're just waiting. I've got to download it again. There we are. Right, should have it now. Right, okay then, apologies for the stumbling along here. Right, so this PowerPoint, I made this slide, but the rest of them were produced by someone else. And I was fascinated to, I'm going to leave it like this, and then I can see if anybody else joins the session. I think it comes up on my screen. Okay, so the PowerPoint was produced, it's dated 2017. We don't know who did the research or who to credit, but the Jamaica Box might have contained material and evidence on the sales of the Cupis and Penance estates to Percy Jr. in 1940. On the other hand, it might not. And it started our research into the sales of the remaining plantations owned by the Penrhyn family in Jamaica. It also contains reference to another Jamaica Box, which was put together and used by Clarkson in his abolition tours, and its reference to Wisbech Museum. So we'll go down to the next one. So this is how the presentation was that I found, and it was mind-boggling. So this box, where was this box? I didn't know where it was. It's only in the last 4 months that we discovered that the box was at Penrhyn Castle. Apparently it had been on display many years ago, but then it had been taken off display. But it's now back on display. But I'll tell you the end of the story now, so you won't be disappointed waiting, because when we got there it was empty. But never mind, that's all part of the story. So this slide says that the Pennant's involvement in Jamaica spanned 300 years, from Captain Gifford Pennant's arrival in Jamaica in about 1660. He actually arrived in 1656, I think, to Hugh Napier Pennant, who sold the estates in 1940. The Jamaica Box may have contained deeds, accounts, registers and letters. I think it would have been like the equivalent of the parliamentary red box. That's how I liken it. Then it says the plantations, their plantations, referring to the Pennants in the 18th century, included Cupis, Denby, Coates Pen, Thomas River, all in Clarendon, and Kings Valley in Westmoreland. Now we've got Ivor from Pennants in Jamaica with us, and Ivor, I know how interested you are in this specific history, but I referred earlier to the fact that it started a search in the previous slide. I said that it started our research into the sales of the remaining plantations owned by the families in Jamaica. And how did it manage to do that? Well, I'm now going to enlarge this example that was used on this page, and we realise that this was really something quite special. The Right Honourable Hugh Napier, Baron Penrhyn, to Percy Jr. Esquire. It's a conveyance document, a sales document of Pennants and Cupis, including the Pennants Deuces in the parish of Clarendon in the island of Jamaica. And it very kindly included the reference in Bangor Archives. So we were able to ask Bangor Archives if they could find this document for us, which they did, and we've now been able to see it. So that's okay. So that's what started off a very interesting project. Right, the next slide that was presented in this document shows where some of the plantations are in parts of Jamaica. So this is West Westmoreland over here. Not sure if it was called Westmoreland at this stage, but this is where the Kings Valley plantation would be. And the Pennant family, who eventually came to build and own Penrhyn Castle, owned, we think, 6 plantations in Jamaica, although the plantations were sold and new ones bought over the time. Here in Clarendon, the Thomas River and Cupis are marked, Denby and Coates Pen, but Pennants would have been up here north of Clarendon, the Pennants plantation. Okay, so we couldn't quite make out how this PowerPoint was designed to be presented, because we've just got the slides, we haven't got the presentation that went with it. But so interesting were the items that had been chosen that I felt that, you know, it is worth sharing. Now, they'd obviously, the person who made the PowerPoint had obviously researched in Bangor archives and had selected out different bits and pieces and presented them here. And this is from 1723, Pennant Savannah, and the schedule of 75 Negro men, 31 Negro women, 17 boys, 13 girls, cattles and fowls. Right, so, and there are some of the lists neatly presented. This document here, which is probably difficult for you to read, 25 Negroes, Negro men, the women, the boys and the girls. Now, I had the opportunity in June to visit Bangor Archives. Unfortunately, it was officially shut, but they actually let me go in and spend a morning, and also I went back again with Martha, and we spent another session there looking through some of the documents there. But this bit is lifted out because on the same page as the people, they've got the cattle and fowls listed. One of the things that's amazing about the collection of materials relating to the Pennant family's ownership of plantations in Jamaica is the amount of correspondence, enormous amounts of correspondence. So this is just an example that was chosen for this PowerPoint. So Grosvenor Square, this was, Sir, I've received your letter of the 23rd and 27th of January by the Greyhound packet. I wondered, how were these letters, how is this information shared? I don't really understand enough about the postal system that was developed to enable distance management, because by 1785 the Pennant family were settled back in North Wales. Richard Pennant this was, he hopes that the Negroes and cattle are all well, and of you purchasing 15 or 20 Negroes in October and November for the use of Cupis, permission granted. Another quote, I had your letter of the 19th of November, and I'm glad to hear the Negroes are well, and hearing good account of them and of the cattle always gives me pleasure. Richard Pennant, who at that stage was basing himself in Grosvenor Square, London. At the bottom it also says that Mrs. Radden mentions that Suggy Ballantine at Cupis has had a female child of about 10 years, whose pardon the mother is desirous of purchasing. This is 1785. I'm willing to sell the child's pardon, provided there are no objections. So reading this correspondence can be extremely hard, and I feel as if I ought to have given a warning before we even launched into this. Some of these papers, some of this documentation is really very, very hard to read. The slave registers, 1830 to 34, former colonial dependencies, National Archives queue for the slave compensation records. In order to get the compensation that the plantation owners required in order to support the passing of the bill that abolished the slave trade, they had to complete all this documentation. So forms had to be created, and it's extremely complex. So these are some of the lists of some of the enslaved people on the Denby estate. The Denby estate is in Maypen, Clarendon. And interestingly, to me, one of the things which I haven't seen before is that people are identified as either African or Creole. And so only one person identified as African, Hercules, on that list, age 40, which means that he must have come from Africa, presumably. And then on this list, there are more of a mix. But it's also interesting that surnames are beginning to be used. Frank, Richards, Alice, I think this one is, Mingo. And that's one of the things that I'm really interested in, how the names came about. My maiden name was Williams, and there are so many Williamses in Jamaica. I can't believe it. And yet there were no Williams plantation owners to my knowledge. Okay, so that's information then relating to Denby, when there were 466 males, 525 females, a total of 991 enslaved people working on the Denby plantation. Right, they then went on to look at the increase and decrease in the numbers of enslaved people at Cupis and Deuce's gangs, and this is from January to October 1813. And following the ban on trafficking Africans in 1807, planters hoped that natural reproduction amongst the enslaved would sustain their profits. It didn't. The account opposite shows that only 6 live births to 109 Negro females between January and October 1831, and that's a totally unsustainable fertility rate. And there's comments at the bottom about how that was worked out on a 2-to-1 or more needed to maintain population. Female slaves in the Caribbean were 10% less fertile than their North American sisters. Quote there from a K. Morgan, publication 2006. And planters increased their demands on the smaller labour force, willing women and children undertaking tasks previously reserved by males toiling in the fields, but also a reference to the fact that 1812 and 1813 were years when there were hurricanes and earthquakes in Jamaica, and things were even more difficult than usual. Right, there's about 12 of these slides. This one's about compensation, and it talks about after slavery was abolished in 1833, George Hay Dawkins Pennant, the builder of Penrhyn Castle, was awarded £14,683, 7 shillings and 2 pence compensation by Parliament for the 4 plantations and the 764 enslaved he'd inherited. Now, I don't think this is right, because I don't think there was compensation for the plantations. There was compensation for the people. You still own the plantation. And that's important for us to know in our penance project, because going back to that first slide, it wasn't until 1938 that the Pennant family were made to sell their plantations, or they chose to sell their plantations, so they made even more money then. So the Slave Compensation Act in 1835 awarded nearly £20 million of UK taxpayers' money, worth about 17 billion today, according to UCL figures. So that would have meant nearly £995,550 for George Hay Dawkins at 2017 prices. Right, okay, so there's also information about the leak in 2015, when there was an announcement that the money borrowed to fund the Slavery Abolition Act was fully repaid. So that's an interesting comment as well. Right, I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment just to check the screen, because I'm not sure if anybody else was arriving. Okay, so I don't know if there's any comments or thoughts about how things are so far. I hope you can see this okay, Ivor.
Yeah.
Vivian?
Yes. I want to thank you. So as not, sometimes when we do history, it seems so remote that the rhetorical question, why bother? But then we realize that it's really part of us. We cannot get away from it. Because when you spoke about Percy Jr., I realized, I always knew, we're living next door to where he lived. I'm in Norbrook, and his property is at Oaklands. And I want to very quickly share with you something about Percy Jr. in the Who Is Who Jamaica 1960. Percy Jr., the property you just told us was sold, part of the Penrhyn's property in Clarendon to him. He was businessman, justice of the peace, financier, and planter, and he was born in 1882. So he went to Mandeville, the primary school there, and he was a produce dealer since 1896, agent for the United Food Company in Upper Clarendon. The United Food Company, as you know, was responsible for banana dealers. To make a long story short, married, as one child. But what is more, and what is truly stunning, is that in 1943, he donated £15,000 and 19 acres of land to build the Percy Jr. Hospital in Spaldings, and also classrooms to Knox College, Spaldings, and other charities. And here they give his address next door to me, Oaklands, 116 Constant Spring Road. It's now, the property is now known as Oakland. So when you visit Jamaica and you're going up Constant Spring, you will see Oaklands. But what is amazing about Liz's presentation and juxtaposed with Percy Jr. is how he gave back. His chief business was ginger. So some of those ginger biscuits you ate might have come from Percy Jr. Penance land. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you very much indeed. And we certainly need to know more about Percy Jr. It's great to hear about his the donation and the creation of the Percy Jr. Hospital, which is amazing, but it does block all internet searches for anything to do with Percy Jr.
I noticed that. Why?
Look that up, all you get is the hospital, but that's fine. Okay.
What is the reason for that?
It's because the hospital comes up.
Yeah, but there's nothing about Percy Jr.
Doesn't say anything about Percy. No, I've not been able to find anything on the internet, but I can search more. But we're in touch with the family, presumably then with his son. Sure.
Can I ask what nationality Percy Jr.?
Jamaican.
Okay.
Born in but he's one child he has. I mean, his grandson. He has one child, a daughter. So it would be his grandson. And I'm young enough to tell you that I remember that every New Year's Eve, he had this grand party, and you could hear the music. and the leader of the country, the governor general, met on arrival, and so on. So you were not anybody if you didn't attend the Percy Junior Ball.
Oh, so fantastic. Thank you.
So
Okay.
it is not on in Google, but here is my reference.
Ah, brilliant. Thank you.
Louis Jamaica, 1960.
Okay, maybe you can look up a bit more, maybe and photograph it and send it to me. That would be great.
Yes, there's nothing, it's photograph, isn't there, or anything? I presume it would be at the hospital. But he was very, very generous. Ginger.
Okay, thank you.
Produce dealer, and Europe needed the ginger, especially at Christmas. Ginger house, ginger cakes, and ginger houses, and
Right, I'm taking the two hands up. Garrick first, and then June, Elizabeth. Garrick.
Just on your presentation, Liz, I was looking at some background information to the acquisition of the plantation in Jamaica. And there's a couple of points here. During the latter half of the 17th century, Gifford Pennant, originally from Flintshire, began acquiring land and came to own one of the largest estates on the island, 20 times larger than the average. 20 times larger than the average. His son Edward, 1672 to 1736, became the Chief of Justice in Jamaica. Chief of Justice. So they were completely intertwined into the whole system of Jamaica.
They certainly were, Garrick. Thank you very much indeed for that. It's interesting. I haven't identified yet, but somebody might know, which this 20 times larger than average plantation was, or whether it was the combination of having 6 that made it 20 times larger than average. I have heard that before, but thank you very much indeed, Garrick. June Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask you, when you'd done your presentation, you'd mentioned that Lord Penrhyn plantation, it was closed down in 1938. I thought it was 40 because Robert Rumble came in 38 and went to prison for 2 years, and 2 years after the strike it was closed down. Have I got that wrong? Because you know what I'm like with Robert Rumble.
Okay, then just a quick one on this time at the end of the Pennant's years in Jamaica, if I put it that way. In 1938, Robert Rumble led the tenants group in Pennants, and I'll mention this later, but he led them in a strike against Lord Penrhyn. That was 1938. By 1940, the plantation had been sold, and it was sold to Percy Junior, who then, we think, sold it on to the then Jamaican government, which was the British government, who then sold it on to individuals who could afford to buy a plot. So that sorts the dates out for you, June Elizabeth. You okay with that?
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's go back then and just go through the rest of these. Right, so here is a letter from the bank manager. My bank manager doesn't send letters that look like this or talk about amounts of money, even with current day figures. Right, so the Denby and Pennants estates, the balance being transferred to the general account, shows a debit balance of £6,608.07. So we have the honour to be, my lords, my lord, your ladyship's dedicated servants. So this was the lawyers in Boston Quet and Curtis and Co. so all the detail was being transferred, and you can understand why they'd need a box for all this correspondence, wouldn't you? Right, so the last but one talks about indentures and selling the Jamaican estates. The estates in the Jamaican Almanac of 1910, Denby, in brackets SUG, which presumably stands for sugar, Penance, Broomhall and Cupis, which it says are all pens. So a pen is somewhere where animals were kept. A sugar estate was where they grew sugar. Now, when Martha and I were in the archives, we found quite a bit about Broomhall, and that was a surprise because I'd never heard Broomhall mentioned before. But he sold that, it seems, in 1924. And then in 1940, his son, Hugh Napier Douglas Pennant, the 4th Baron of Penrhyn, sold the remaining estates, Penance, Cupis and Deuces, which is sometimes called Pennant Deuces, in brackets Denby. And that's the total there. And that was a total of 3,331 acres. Now, the print on these illustrations is very difficult to read, but it would be really interesting to find these actual documents and follow them through, because whoever did this PowerPoint had done their research, and I'm really respectful of that and would love to know who it was. But there was another box, da-da-da-da-da-da. And this is Clarkson's box. Now, Clarkson was an abolitionist, and he had a box which contained items such as are illustrated, and he used them these items to illustrate the talks that he was giving around the country in his efforts and his fight for abolition of slavery. And there was the clue, Wisbech and Fenland Museum. So I contacted them, asked them if they knew who this PowerPoint might have been produced by or what it was for. They didn't know, but it's very interesting in terms of a museum, because I'm talking about museums taking responsibility or not earlier. Wisbech and Fenland Museum take very seriously the important story of Clarkston's efforts to end the transatlantic trade in Africans, and they continue as a museum. They host events which bring together organisations fighting modern slavery. Bear in mind we're in the Fens here. So this conference was coming up in 2021. It wasn't available to see on Zoom, I don't think, because I remember talking to them about it. But a fascinating example of a museum being very proactive and continuing to be proactive, including reference to modern day slavery. Okay, so that was that PowerPoint. So you can imagine how excited I was and how frustrated when I couldn't find out who produced it. But anyway, that's the first time I've shared it in any venue, but it was worth looking that through, I think, and picking up a few of the points. But now I'm going to go on, and this is a bit of a session where I'm talking a lot, but you'll forgive me for that. We want to go on to tell you about when the North Wales Jamaica Society went to visit Penrhyn Castle, which was about a month ago. And we decided well, we'd approached the National Trust over the years, the North Wales Jamaica Society, to see how we could help the National Trust in some way. For example, we gave them a very large Jamaican flag, which we thought would look extremely imposing up their flagpole on top of the castle. We haven't managed that one yet. They're making feeble excuses about the pole needs maintenance or something, but we've tried all sorts of things. We've launched Black History Month there a couple of years. We've run conferences there, but they're now saying that they really want to be involved. So I'm a little bit disappointed that no one's arrived to take part in this
We'll
session.
get the flag up, Liz. Don't worry. We'll get that flag up. After the 18th of October, my meeting there, we'll get the flag up.
Flag up poll. Okay, then. So I'm now going to just go back to, let me sort my PowerPoint out first. Go back to the previous PowerPoint and explain what happened when we visited the National Trust. I'd had a meeting first, and that had gone very well and suggested a whole lot of activities and things that we could possibly do. But let's see. Okay, then. So exploring the story. So welcomed by a delightful lady, and she is one of the curators at the castle, relatively newly appointed. Right, so we were invited to work with the National Trust. So this is our motley crew here. We also had Jessica Clapham joined us on the day as well, and we had Marshall Sinclair, who comes from Montego Bay. He's related to Natalie Fagan Brown, who's the current chair of the North Wales Jamaica Society, her husband Tony, and Leslie Evans, who's our wonderful treasurer. More about that on another occasion. Right, okay, so what can we do? Ideas, please. So think of ideas, what we can do as we're looking through. Right, the next, not very brilliant photographs, I'm afraid. So here are the crew, and we were looking at the two paintings, the two illustrations, one of the Denby plantation and one of Pennants. These paintings we've looked at again and again and examined them, and Ivor, I know you've worked out where the different buildings were on the Pennants one, and it's really interesting. Now, Natalie, who was brought up in Northern Clarendon, had a grandfather who was a carpenter, a very skilled carpenter. And she was taught by her grandfather to recognize the different woods. And so we were looking to see particularly if there was any wooden furniture or any wood used that was that could indicate that it had come from Jamaica. But as we talked and discussed it, very little was brought from Jamaica to build the castle. The castle was mainly sourced from local marble from Anglesey and local woods from maybe the surrounding area, but very few things from Jamaica. This, we think, could have been a chair that could have been brought over from Jamaica, but it seems unlikely that they would have considered that there would have been fine enough furniture in Jamaica that warranted transporting to this enormous castle. 365 rooms, I reckon there is. So it would have been an awful lot of shipments, but the wood might have come over, who knows. And the other picture, Marshall was talking to one of the National Trust volunteers, and it really made me realise in talking with her that some of the volunteers who've been there for 20 years and more now, they know a whole lot of the history of the castle and interesting things about it. And I think perhaps we could learn more from them, whereas the staff who've only been there a few years maybe don't know so much about it. This desk was a fascination to Natalie, and she's having a good look at it and exploring around. An amazing carving on it, but again, doesn't look as if it was something that had been brought from Jamaica. And then, there it was, the Jamaica box. It isn't looking as shiny as in that first illustration, but there it was. But sadly, when it was opened up, it was empty. But we do know that there were so many documents, so many letters, so much correspondence that actually when the castle was built, it was built with a special room for the Jamaican correspondence, which was all filed there. The box itself, it says there, it looks like T. Briggs, manufacturer, Piccadilly. So it would have been the kind of velvet lined box that you'd keep the documentation that you were dealing with relating to your plantations, doesn't it? An amazing, amazing piece. So having thought so much about this Jamaica box, to find it there empty, but at least we'd found it. That was the important thing. And they said it had just been put away and nobody had thought that it was anything important to display. So we can find out more of the story. But the story of that room and the collection of documents is interesting, because when I think it's about 1955, the property was given to the National Trust in lieu of death duties or whatever families do. The archivist in Bangor, the county archivist, suggested that perhaps they could take care of the documents to save the family, you know, any issues. So that's how Bangor University's come to have the most incredible collection of plantation papers. Excuse me. In many cases, families have destroyed their papers. And the Jamaican High Commissioner made a particular point to say that it was really valuable that the documents had been saved. And they're certainly fascinating. Right, other things we saw as we went around the castle, and anybody who was there, we saw this one, which is labelled up as Jamaica, but I can't read what it says underneath at the moment. And there are a number of other paintings of different parts of Jamaica, which I haven't included in this PowerPoint. I've just gone on to show you the small display of information that is currently in a small alcove off the cafe about sugar and slavery. It talks about Richard Pennant, who in 1756, as a wealthy merchant and member of Parliament for Liverpool, married Anne Susanna Warburton, the heiress of an old Penrhyn estate, the old Penrhyn estate in the Ogwen Valley where the castle now stands. So it was through fortuitous marriage that the Pennant family was able to regain ownership of the whole of the Penrhyn estate, I understand. Right. Also, the next illustration shows the Pennants in Jamaica, map of Jamaica, so we'll just move on. The Pennant family came from Flintshire. This is what the National Trust write up here in the exhibition, but Gifford Pennant had emigrated to Jamaica in the mid-17th century, and he was awarded a grant of land in 1665 and came to own one of the greatest estates in the island, as you just said, 20 times larger than average. His son, Edward, became Chief Justice of Jamaica, and one of Edward's sons, Samuel, became the Lord Mayor of London. And John added even more to the Jamaican estate by a judicious marriage, so that by 1750, the main branch of the Pennant family returned to Britain and were controlling their properties by letter, corresponding with their agents. Richard Pennant was born in London. Well, there's a question mark about that. He might have been born on the ship on the way over. 1737, and educated at Eton and Cambridge. The Pennants were typical entrepreneurs of their time, ready to invest, prepared to take a close interest in their properties, and Richard Pennant took the same hands-on approach with his new estate in Wales, developing. So this is just to, this is also on their illustration. I put the mark where the Pennants is. You can see it's really in the central Jamaica, right up in the hills, and that's the Pennants estate particularly. But they had all these other estates, and this is the a copy of the painting. But what's interesting, Ivor, when you get to see the real painting, there's definitely a building up here, but it doesn't look like a great house. And this is the River Mino. These were the estate buildings. Yeah. So also there's a board talking about the world that the slaves made, or two parts to that discussion. And then they also include Wales and the struggle against slavery, because Welsh men and Welsh women took part in the struggle to end slavery in the Caribbean and later in the United States. So these are stories that can be explored more in Wales and told more in Wales, because this is a tiny remnant of a brilliant exhibition that was put on and showcased in Penrhyn Castle in 2007. And it's just tragic that that excellent display was dismantled after a few years. Not, you know, there was a lot of campaigning to try and keep it. But yeah. Another comments there. So this is what I wondered now. We've been invited to work with the National Trust at Penrhyn Castle. You know, what can we do? What ideas are there? And interestingly, the National Trust has done a consultation recently, so I can come back to this because it gives us some ideas there. So I'm going to stop sharing there and see if there's anything else any of you wanted to add or to question. Lucy.
Right. Sorry to keep you waiting. I think one very dramatic thing that might be possible to suggest they put on display is to have somebody today talk about Jamaica today and what the link is with the Pennant family. As Vivian Crawford did for us at the beginning of this meeting. And that really catches people to hear a voice of today talk about today. So I would recommend that. In terms of marriage alliances, they're very important in slave-owning families, aren't they? I think Miranda Kaufman's next book is going to be about marriage alliances. And maybe some work could be done on that, which will, again, bring the whole subject to ground it in Wales. You know, which families married, which families. You talked about the man who'd made his money over in Jamaica having been granted, his family having been granted land in 1665, when the British government need people to go do that work there, and how he marries a local landowner. Well, that happened all over the country, and you could quote different places, particularly locally, but maybe some other places in other parts of the country with well-known families. And there was one other thing I wanted to say, Liz, was you talked about the listing of enslaved Africans being as either Creole or African. And that happens after 1807, after the abolition of the slave trade, because those official records have got to explain why people are on estates, are on the plantation estates. So it's important where they were born and that they weren't imported illegally, according to the law of that time, following the abolition of the slave trade.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Lucy.
you.
That's really interesting. Vivian, you got your hand up to say something, and then
thank you so much. You were wondering whether there was any mahogany from Jamaica, which might have been used at Penrhyn Castle, but Thomas Chippendale was the furniture maker at the time. And if you are who you are, then. In Jamaica, they would say you cannot have rice and peas without peas. So you need to explore a little more about the furniture. That would be very interesting, and the paneling, because it is said at the time, if you didn't have mahogany in your house, you were not saying the real thing. You were a pretender, and you know that pretenders were sent to the tower and they returned bereft of their heads.
Right, okay. I think that's a really good point, because it's far more likely that timber came over, perhaps came into Lancaster or where it was that Chippendale was working from. Yeah, so it's more likely that the wood would have come and been processed and the furniture made, possibly, on commission for the castle. Because certainly some of the big pieces would have had to have been made specially. So that's a really good point. Thank you very much indeed, Vivian. Rosemary next, and then Jackie.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just a few points, going right back to the beginning of your really enlightening presentation, Liz. You mentioned about the letters, how they corresponded. When I was researching the Royal African Company documents at the National Archives at Kew, London, I was never, I mean, I was astonished, and it makes perfect sense for those times. But, the date of the letter might have been the 1st of March, 1700, and then received 8th of October in London, because they would just be sent taken on passing ships. Then they had to make their way across the land as well. So time must have been different, because you have agents reporting on the ground of what was going on right there and then, business-wise, connected with the trades and their investments, but they wouldn't receive that information until 6 months, possibly 18 months later. So so they just seem to work in a different time frame than as we see today, we work now. The other thing, just to say about timber, as a nation, we were importing vast amounts of hardwoods directly from Africa as well. So they were coming in directly from Africa, and also from countries like Malaysia as well, via the East India Company. And I just wondered, these documents, I think I missed what you said. Where are the documents stored now that were in the Jamaica box? Where are they stored now?
They were stored in a room in Penrhyn Castle, and in the 1960s, I think it may have been later than the 1950s, they went to the archives of Bangor City Council, I suppose, Bangor Council, or the county archives, and they then went to Bangor University archives, where they're held now.
I just wonder if there may be other documents stored at Kew.
There are, and also Garrick's found documents in Liverpool as well, haven't you, Garrick? Yeah. So it'd be quite useful to have a knowledge sort of collectively of what documents there are where, and how we can get to them. And one of the things that we're exploring with the archives at Bangor is how these documents can be viewed by researchers in other parts of the country or world. So they've installed a projector in the ceiling that can look down, because the maps are really big. Some of the documents are really big, and they're too big for a little desktop kind of setup. But they tried it before we had a session when we tried it before they shut down. But it was really difficult to see the detail, because it looked as if they hadn't cleaned the lens of the projector, so it was a bit difficult. Anyway, we'll see, and it would be good to do that again, and let people in Pennant and any other academics could use that that facility to access any of them. And there is a very, very good catalogue. So the detail of all the documents is clearly laid out, so people can access that as well. But I'm not sure if that's online. I think it might be. Thank you very much, Rosemary. Thank you. Okay, Jackie, I think you had your hand up, and we got 2 in the chat.
Yeah, so regarding the letters, what I was thinking was it would be interesting to pick out some of those letters and have the present day Jamaicans, Penrhyn descendants, respond to some of the letters. I think that'd be a really interesting exercise. I don't know where you put it, you know, but really to have a response to some of those letters from present day descendants, you know, of those slaves. That would be really deep. Mm-hmm.
I think it would be really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The present descendants are 2 brothers. There's a the elder brother's called Richard Douglas Pennant, and he's based in Cyprus, I think, or Malta. He left Wales, married, and settled away from the castle. He didn't feel that was what he wanted to spend his life doing, managing it. The family's monies are in trust for him and his younger brother, and his younger brother Edmund has done a lot of research into the history of the family. I think it would be extremely difficult and perhaps not sensitive at this moment in time to ask them to do what you're asking. Because we're working with them, with their family foundation, the Douglas Pennant Family Foundation, to look at funding educational projects in Jamaica. And I think working on that practicality first is probably the best way of moving forward. Then and wait for the book that Edmund's been writing. He's had a researcher working with him, so it'll be really interesting to see how he interprets the family's history. I did see him when I was in Wales, incidentally. It was in Bangor, walking along the shopping centre, and I went over, said to him, hi, I mean, I know him, I've met him before. And I said, you know, that it was good to see him, and did he know what we were doing? And we were working hard, and it was good for me to have the chance to be back in Wales, and we'll get things moving along because we deal with their solicitors. That's the North Wales Jamaica Society and the Pennants team. And he knew what we were doing and seemed quite okay, but there is an enormous sensitivity around the family and a protectiveness by the local people, I feel, that they aren't picked on. And Edmund said to me, he said, I would have loved to have gone to Jamaica, but we were afraid that people wouldn't like us. And I said, I don't think that'd be the response at all, Edmund. I think you would be warmly welcomed because of being honest about your family's history. So who knows, when we organise our next study trip, we might be taking Edmund Douglas Pennant with us. That would be good. And we've met with Douglas, Richard as well. Garrick.
Just a couple of points, Liz, because when you came back from the visit to the castle, I did say, you know, I did ask a question about Blue Badge and whether there's any black staff at the castle, and I guess the answer would be 0. There are no black staff there, but looking forward, it would be a good idea for some Jamaican to be trained, Blue Badge, to be there in the castle, who can actually, you know, engage with the public, and also about the history of the castle. You know, that would be a really positive outcome, I think, and it's something I think I would want to push forward. the other thing that we need to bear in mind when we talk about the money and the profit gained from the plantation, it wasn't just the profit to build the castle and that was it. The research that I've looked at, Liz, also talk about in Wales, the money was used for the railway, it was used for schools, it was used for a lot more infrastructure. And so, you know, when we have these conversations, we need to just explain, you know, how Flintshire, what, you know, that area of Wales, you know, how it become what it is as a result of those plantations. So it's much bigger than the castle. And I think historically, you know, around the education, and of course, on this platform, we continue to talk about Black history and British history. And we need to maintain these conversations that when we talk about Black history, as what we're discussing now, we're really talking about British history. And we need to get that information out into the education establishment, schools, colleges, university, and don't try to separate this conversation and pigeonhole into a Black history only conversation.
Yeah, I think they're really good points, Garrick. Thank you very much indeed. I think the point you made about Black staff working at the castle, I think that's a really, really interesting idea. But certainly there needs to be the story told. Whether they could do it, we could do it in a filmed way, whether our colleagues in Penrhyn, Jamaica and Denbigh in Jamaica we might be able to produce a film that could be shown. I know they've done that in other museum exhibits up there. Martha, you've got a point, and then Rosemary.
Well, I think it was Rosemary first, actually.
Rosemary first.
Thank you for that, Martha. Yeah, just a second, you know, what Garrick was just saying, you know, that it's an inclusive history, you know, that affects everybody. You know, part of my background is Jewish, and I've done a lot of work when I used to lecture on setting up tourism sites where atrocities have taken place. So obviously that feeds into the Holocaust museums. And of course, in the early days, there was a lot of difficulties around the globe with various different, you know, governments not wanting a Holocaust museum on their territory. There was a lot of resistance because there was a lot to be covered up, you know, and it's perseverance. And I know now that in Wales, if I'm right, if I can put this to the residents of Wales who are on here, that Black ethnic minority histories are now part of the Welsh school curriculum. So therefore, museums are places where children, adults go to be educated. And we must hit back, I believe. That's not the right word, hit back, but we must, you know, bring this to the Welsh government attention. You know, it's all very well to put something down on documentation, but what are they going to do? What are they doing?
Well, that sort of leads into my question in a way, what you've just said, because things are beginning to happen, but you know, the cogs of progress just go really slowly. But of course, we are excited here in Wales that you know, that they want to make Wales an anti-racist society by the year 2030. And like the organisation that I work with, for instance, I'm doing some work with an organisation called NUREN, which stands for North Wales Regional Equality Network. We're putting together an exhibition called Pobl Fel Ni, which in Welsh means people like us. And it's going to be touring North Wales. And it's about breaking down those barriers of racism. We've worked with different ethnic groups. including refugees, travelers, and you know, Japanese, Chinese, Afro-Caribbean, to produce some artworks and say a little bit about those cultures that are here within North Wales. So, but on an educational front, I mean, for instance, I won't bore you with all my background, but next week it sort of leads into your question. So there are a couple of schools that are quite proactive, and you know, they want it to filter through the education system as well. Talking about well, Black History Month is not just meant to be Black History Month, it's meant to be Black History 365, you know. But we'll start, I mean, Black History Month is better than nothing. So I'm going in to talk about, I've got like a load of assemblies that I'm doing next week. But I want to make it relevant. So the question is to you lot, you know, what do you, but I've only got a 15-minute slot. And I mean, it's vast. This subject is vast. And I'm going to be doing this assembly from year 7s to year 11s. Okay, so it's not going to be one size fits all. Thanks to Liz, for instance, we've got Anansi the spider who's going to come in. He's been, you know, mascot of the North Wales Jamaica Society, because I want to lighten the mood a little bit and talk about the folklore that travelled with the slaves from West Africa, because Anansi the spider is a West African Ashanti Ghanaian you know, it's a story from folktale from that originates from there. So the fact that it's also a Jamaican you know, story tells you something. You know, it obviously traveled with the slave trade. So I think that's fascinating. The fact that we're going to use this spider is good, so that lightens the mood. But yeah, the question is, I suppose, what to include and what to leave out in 15 minutes, because it's doing my head in at the moment. This is an opportunity. You know, I've made a little film, a short film about me, about my life, about the fact that my father was, you know, Windrush generation. I'm second generation, but also my mother was Jewish English, whatever you want to, you know, so there's a mix there, which is interesting. So I can talk about my perspective. But it's like, I want to try and make it relevant to the people that actually live in Wales, because they need to know, especially the young people, you know, why should it matter? Why are we even talking about this subject? So, yeah, I'd like to hear from you. Obviously, I will mention Penrhyn Castle and, you know, the links to the slave trade, because, you know, that's relevant for them because it's on their doorstep. But I also want to mention about the contributions that Black people have made in Wales itself. So bringing it up to the modern day, you know, people that they might even recognise. But I've only got 15 minutes, so it will be nice to hear from you what you think I should leave in, because obviously then I'm hoping this can be, you know, it can filter through to the rest of a lot of the schools. This is a proactive school that I'm going to, so they're already on board with the legislation. But most of the schools in Wales, I have to say, are just, they're clueless, absolutely clueless. Sorry, I'll shut up waffling now. What do you all think? What should I put in and what should I leave? Yeah, Vivian, go for it.
I wanted to comment about the Anansi.
Yeah.
Because in Jamaica, in my childhood, there was nothing positive about him. He was a trickster, and always, I never forget in childhood being told that he brought home the 3 plantains, his wife and his 2 daughters, and he gave them the 3 plantains. And then when they were about to eat, he said, well, eat up, my dears. I've worked all day hard, 3 plantains, I have nothing for myself. And each gave him a half, so he ended up with more. It was very negative. I don't know what was the story in Ghana, but I am guided in my childhood by Anansi in another way, King Bruce of Scotland. It was a spider's web and the spider that helped him to overcome his difficulties. So I don't know how you juxtapose that. Thank you.
No, thanks. That helps, Vivian. And I know I agree with you. There's a lot of negative stories around Anansi, but there's also positive ones and ones with, you know, morals as well. There's one about the pot of wisdom, and basically ends by saying that we need to appreciate the wisdom of other nations, not just our own wisdom, but there's wisdom to be gained from listening to others. So that's a story that I'm going to use. So I'm going to use the positive ones, you know.
Well, we have to develop this persona of our Anansi. You saw a couple of pictures there that we had our first showcase event with him in Bangor just at the beginning of September. So that was interesting. A couple of things in the chat. Thank you, Lucy. You say it would be good to have a description of today's Jamaica, particularly the places depicted in the paintings on display at Penrhyn. And yes, we've got a good photographer called Clifford Peddy, who's done lots of photographs of pennants for us. And there is also a BBC film that was produced for 2007, which also showcases the area. It doesn't. We're not 100% sure exactly where the painting was. If it was a photograph, you'd take it. Where the painting of pennants was positioned. We've not been able to get somebody to take a photograph in exactly the same directions. Too many trees and things now. But we did find the Great House there some years ago when we were over traveling and touring. So a very, very big welcome to Jim Sakordin. Welcome to you, Jim. He says, hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning. Sorry I've joined late, but you had a hospital appointment. So it's good to see you, and it's good that you're seeing so many faces from the UK and Jamaica. So thanks, Jim, for joining us. That's really wonderful. I'm just delighted. And it was lovely to spend a bit of time with you, Jim, and see the reality of all those books. Ooh, so jealous. Garrick.
I know you spoke before about Richard Pennant sort of moving away from Wales and living elsewhere, sort of trying to, I don't know if he's trying to forget, but certainly living somewhere else. It's just going through my head while you were talking. If we could arrange something in the future where Richard come face to face with pennants, black pennants from Jamaica. That could be on Zoom or it could be in real person. This is the other side of you. This is the 50% of you, the other side of you. You got the white side, but this is the black side of Pennant. I just wonder how that would work, you know, in a situation, and what can come out of that.
Garrick, that would work fine, and it's been done already. The BBC filmed in 2007 Edmund Douglas Pennant with Jackie Pennant, who's a black Pennant descendant, and she was welcomed by him, and he was very courteous with her in the film. That's where he talks about the fact the family are going to help education charities in Jamaica, and we've been chivying them ever since 2007 to do something about it, and we're now working constructively together. So yes, it is possible. One of the first things that I did when I was focusing again in North Wales was to link Jamaican poet Yasser Safari with Richard Douglas Pennant, because he's a poet as well, and we actually arranged a joint poetry event where Yassus and Richard Douglas Pennant and Martin Dawes, a Welsh poet, all worked together under some really very sensitive conditions. Yasser Safari wasn't willing to perform in the castle. In fact, he wasn't willing to go into the castle. We had to meet Richard Douglas Pennant at his home, which was fine, and he was very open in what he was doing. but they're also, as a family, they're cautious because they know how vulnerable in a way that they are to people taking advantage or whatever they might think. But yeah, it's a sensitive path to travel. But I think the more folks like you, Jackie, with a surname Pennant, the more who engage with us and the castle, the better, because I think that anybody with the surname Pennant should have free admission to the castle. In fact, I think anybody with any links with Jamaica should have a free admission to the castle. I mean, we have a new member of the North Wales Jamaica Society called Zola, who came to Bangor a couple of years ago to do, she's on a Shevingen scholarship. She's doing nuclear physics. And she decided to get to know the local area and where should she visit. And somebody suggested Penrhyn Castle. Of course, she had absolutely no idea. And she said it was like an absolute slap in the face when she realised that it was actually, she'd paid £12 or whatever it is, the admission to the National Trust, to go and visit a property that had been built by her, the funds raised by her forefathers. So yes, it's really, really a tricky one. Jim, I saw you had your hand up there. Jim, do the thing. Jim, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, Jim. Thank
Thank you. I just want to make a couple of comments. Well, first of all, I want to say it's really good to know our sister has arrived back in Oz, safe and sound, and back to her normal activities. It was really grateful having fish and chip lunch with you at my home. Good to see you in a different context, close by, and you enjoy my food, including my afters. But I wanted, from Martha said, doing an assembly is quite a challenge. But I think Liz's advice is best, that the BBC has done chunk bits and pieces that's almost self-contained for 15-minute, 1 hour, 30-minute sessions. Because teaching Black history, is it Black history or white history? Before colonialism, Black people across the continent that were there, not only in Africa, but right across the world. There was a different history. But imperialism, colonialism, and slavery, and now neocolonialism, puts another slant on history. And clearly, we cannot teach 7,000 years of history in a 15-minute session, or even a 15-day session, or 15 3-hour sessions. So I would certainly, Martha, take Liz's advice and have a look at the BBC. There was some great programs in the 60s and 70s. I was involved with Sir Trevor Phillips in the 70s in doing a program called Skin about race relations and color. In the 70s, there's tons of material about and can be accessed, depending how you prepare the youngsters, what age group they are, what interests they've shown. But the preparation is important. Any recommended reading or handout for the session is important. Post-lecture handout is useful, and recommendation about reading and follow-up. But it's got to be, you've got to take into account the institution. I think you said, Martha, that they are progressive to some extent. So you're building on what's been established, and especially referring to positive things in the local issues, and then prepare yourself for answering one-to-one questions if you've got time, or at a later stage, or kids can meet you, individual kids or group of kids can meet you and talk. But I want to think this thing about Black history. Is it Black history? I've written a fair bit, published a fair bit on it, and call it Black history, because that's the context in which most people relate to. But was it Black history, or was it white history? and their treatment of black people. We want to get through. Was it about equal opportunities and equal opportunities as a human right and not a privilege? So it's very, very difficult. I'd like us to revisit this concept of black history. Or is it world history? It's changing all the time. I had a discussion with a colleague a week or so ago who told me he's setting up in Luton, where I lived for over 60 years, a South Asian History Month. And that's further divisions and cutting things into small slices and working in silos. And so I said, who you regard as Eurasians, that people from South India and Asia. And I thought, what about the rest of Asia? What about other people born here from South Asian ancestry and so on? So this thing is not easy. When we're dabbling in teaching history or learning history or promoting black experience, we've got to be so careful. My brother Vivian talked about Anansi. Well, I tell you, something stuck in my mind. Even before I started school, we had a little book. All the British thing about black sheep and everything. But we had a little book. I don't know where it came from, but there was a white family, and the white girl had brought a black friend home, and the mother and the white girl was scrubbing the black girl to make her white, and the black girl wanted to be white, and so that stuck in my mind. There's so much cruelty, so much denial of our history, what our contribution has been towards history. White history today is black history that's been adapted. Mali, one of the probably poorest country in the world, and the last place anyone would want to visit, black or white. But do you know, in Timbuktu had the first library in the world? Do you know they were carrying out heart operations in Timbuktu, in the hospitals in Timbuktu? Hundreds of years ago, this civilization of Africa, that is the cradle of civilization of the world. We're going back centuries. Iraq, look how they belittle the Iraqis. And look at what the Iraqi civilization and history has been. So when we talk about our contribution, someone mentioned that Martha should look at the inventors. We're more than inventors. We are strong people. We led the world in architecture, in language, in a whole range of things, in medicine, you name it, we're there, in arts. So it's very, very difficult. When taking a session, what are you building on? What are you leaving behind? And what leads are you giving? It's not easy. It's not easy, but nevertheless, this session, thank God, it does give us a chance to explore. I hope no one sees this as any criticism. It wasn't intended to be. But I have some notes which I've addressed a number of meetings around the country during Black History Month. And I'm happy to share those with you, Martha. And if other people want to share their notes with you, mind you, that session I did was an hour session, but I did circulate my notes previous to this session and after the session, my amended notes. So we're learning from each other. And, at 80, I was 80 on 26th of August, and my Diamond Jubilee, which we never celebrated because my poor wife is ill. She had an accident in the home, broke her hip and her upper leg, and at the moment she's in a care home. And she's being looked after by our son. 70 miles, let me finish it. 70 miles away, so I'm on my own, lonely, and feeling missing my wife a great deal. Despite receiving a card from King Charles, is it King Charles? And Queen Camilla, congratulating us. So forgive me if I strayed a bit, but life is not so good for me at the moment, but I'm doing my best. Thank you.
You are doing your best, Jim, and I have to say you're looking good. I'm really, really happy to see that you've been able to join us, and I know you're having such a hard time with the challenges with Doreen. And anyway, we're all sending our good wishes to
Thank
you.
you,
And
everyone.
I just want to answer the doctor there. So thanks, doctor.
Jim, yeah.
For those comments, and I take everything you said on board, and I agree it is a difficult task. And yeah, I'd like to take you up on your offer in some future date and have a look through the notes that you have. Definitely, I think
I'll send it tonight, Martha. I'll send it tonight to you.
Okay, I'll put my email in the chat then.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for that offer. I think what I'm gonna concentrate on is the personal touch, because it sort of makes sense. There's just too much to cover, and I think possibly on a later occasion to maybe go in and do workshops and explore all those things that you just mentioned. But you need time to do that. I think just for an assembly, it's no point me showing stuff that's already out there that they can access, with their teachers at a later date. That doesn't make sense to me personally, because they've got me there. They've got a living person who comes from, the Windrush generation that has had these experiences. So I think it makes actually more sense to me, as you were speaking, to tell them about my experience of Black history and my experience of, like, maybe, and show the film that the short talks about my family upbringing. I think that would resonate with maybe more, to have someone that lives and works in Wales and that comes from this sort of multicultural background and is working towards lowering the barriers of racism. So I think I'll probably do that, but also include some contributions that Black people in Wales have made to this society where they live, also just to make it relevant to them. Otherwise, they lose interest if it's not relevant to them. So and to bring in a few bits about Penrhyn Castle, because that's going to make it relevant to them. And then the other stuff, which is equally relevant, but maybe not to that 15-minute slot, could be done like as workshops at a later date when we can explore those issues, give them more time, But thank you. But basically, that was all to say thank you. Thanks for your comments.
Vivian, you want to come in? And I know June's waiting. Thank you, Martha, very much indeed. And good luck. And perhaps you'll tell us how you got on next week.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Dr. Jim. I just wanted to say, tangential to this discussion, to remind researchers, especially those doing the descendants of the Penrhyn family, that descendants of enslaved in Jamaica did not get a surname until 1838. 1838, they were given a surname because, remember that as Rex Renton said on this program, we were regarded by Europeans as half animal and half human. So we're not given a surname. The way you call your pet, Dottie or whatever, that's what we were called. So in 1838, it was formalized. And our own Bert Samuels, who's a member of the Reparation Council in Jamaica, said he was at the archive searching, and could not find the person's name because he was looking in the wrong section. The section where our ancestors were regarded as goods. And Colin Channer, as I've said on this program very often, said it in a speech that our ancestors did not arrive through immigration. They came through customs because they were regarded as goods. And Bert Samuel said, when he looked into the section on goods, there was the name. So I am just offering a caution, those who will be doing the research, and to everlastingly thank Liz for coordinating this program.
Well, thank you, Vivian, and thank you for your ongoing support. It's brilliant. June Elizabeth wanted to come in.
Yeah,
And June,
I just want a minute because I'm quite cautious of the time. So I'll start by thanking Jim for the apple pie that he sent with Liz when she left him to come by me to do the Black History. Thank you very much, Jim. One day we'll get together. And just to say, Martha, I had directly messaged you and given you my contact details. And, you know, I can relay, I've done Black History in the schools for over 40 years. So I can maybe exchange some tips and, you know, along with what you get from Jim, later on you'll be able to excel. Okay, thank you. And thank you, Liz, for a lovely session.
all right.
And everybody that's joined, nice to meet you all.
I know everybody can't stay forever, so we'll wrap up fairly quickly, but I've just got a few other things that I wanted to share, if that's okay. The National Trust have put out a consultation on email. I'm a National Trust member, and so it came to me. And these are some of the things that they suggested. Rosemary, you wanted to make a comment? I can't hear you, Rosemary.
Sorry, I've never learned after all this time to unmute myself. Yeah, thank you very much, Liz, for the time. I just want to take this opportunity to say how welcome everybody's made me feel being new to this. So I've really appreciated being here today, and I've learned an awful lot already. I'd like to ask, though, due to our ongoing campaign in Brecon to have the plaque contextualized in the museum on permanent display. If you have any contacts in Brecon or the locality within that region, if you could let me know, that would be fantastic, because, you know, we need people, because I'm in Bristol, so I'm an outsider. So we need allies in Brecon who can lobby the council about getting this plaque on display and having, you know, a display about the transatlantic, the Brecon nobility's involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. So I'd really appreciate any contacts that any of you may have. Be great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I wondered about inviting the museum to come and talk to us about what they're going to do.
Well, I will say that the museum, because I've been in correspondence with them, you know, they're waiting. They're in consultation with the town council, but they say it's a sensitive matter. So I've asked, well, who is this sensitive to?
Yes.
Why is it a sensitive matter?
Rosemary, we've had sessions where we've invited several people to come and tell us their story. I'm wondering if we put together a session that you can help, you know, be a part of, that also we can invite the museum, and we could invite Sir Jeff Palmer, who Professor Sir Jeff Palmer from Edinburgh. Now, Jeff's campaigned to have the column, the Dundas column, reworded, and that's been going on. And that story, in comparison with the Brecon story, might be interesting. And I'm not sure if, I just think at the moment to another museum that we could invite as sort of like an example of good practice, and, you know, and to discuss this difficulty that museums have, because obviously these things are terribly sensitive. Who they're sensitive to, as you say, goodness knows, because there's been enough on the television, and I've seen that Colston clip going into the cut more than once, I tell you. Yeah, so that could be one possibility. Rosemary, what do you think about that?
Yes, I mean, perhaps the International Slavery Museum based in Liverpool might
Yes,
get,
of course. We've got
which is fantastic. Fantastic
follow
exhibition.
that.
A lot about African culture. And of course, it leads into campaigns against modern day enslavement, you know. So that would be good, perhaps.
So we have Liverpool gets a Jeff. I'm not sure how he is at the moment, but he that would be really, and of course the Bristol museums where Colston's statue is. I haven't seen him yet, but I didn't get it down to Bristol.
The Bristol Radical History Group have been invited to attend 4 workshops. The Labour Black Mayor Marvin Reeves of Bristol, after the statue fell, he commissioned a working party at the cost of £100,000 to decide what to do with the statue. So the people, they've had a referendum, the people want it displayed, majority in the museum. They held a temporary exhibition. They left the statue on its side, covered in paint, with display boards around it. I won't go into that because that in itself was controversial, what they decided to display on those boards, but it was temporary. I think it lasted about a month. And during that, they asked visitors and online for how they think that the exhibition should be contextualized and should it be permanent. Well, to date, they still haven't decided what to do, and it's still in storage at a secret location.
I just assumed that it was there permanently, and you could go anytime and see it. It is interesting. It's like the Bewdley instance that I talked about earlier, that things can happen that are really very significant, but then, with the blink of an eye, they can go again. I mean, we learned it with the Penrhyn Castle exhibition in 2007. It was loads of money, and of course, I don't know how much it was. It was a lot of money, and then it was just gone. So yeah, we need to keep an eye on that. That's a very good point. I'm just going to, if you need to leave, then I do appreciate that if everybody can stay too long. But some of the things for this consultation about including people from a wide range of backgrounds and circumstances, and that's the point about the staff, and also, that perhaps they should have special sessions when there will be staff who've got a link with Jamaica and can understand and talk about this side of the story. Excuse me. Effective engagement with local communities. One of the things is the staff seem to change so often, and by the time we get round to the next Black History Month, they've got different staff there. So that's been one of the issues. So stick in there, Martha, and we'll be on Black History 365. The ones in green are the ones I've picked out, that we could possibly harness the benefits of digital and technological innovation to improve not only engagement and access, but to improve the telling of the story. And that would be good. Building positive collaborative partnerships between organisations. The National Trust needs to do a bit of learning on this, I think, because they are very much their own organisation, and it's very difficult. You can't, for example, as an organisation, go and run an event in there with them in their grounds. They don't like that. So it's about seeing how we can be positive and collaborative. Engage children and young people. So I mean, what would have been lovely if you could have arranged it, Martha, would have been to have had a complimentary ticket for the children's families to go to Penrhyn Castle with a workbook or introductory book telling the story, that was engaged the families. Who knows, we can think of imaginative ways around this. And then bringing the historical context and stories to life is what's been talked about today. And I think we can engage with that. Jackie, we haven't asked you. You visited Penrhyn Castle some time back. Have you got any comments about it? How you could have felt more comfortable about or more informed when you visited?
Well, when I went to Penrhyn, I did my own research before I went. So, I went with a little information. I did, the volunteers, they were very helpful. There was a French lady, I forget her name, but she actually took me down to the, I guess, a basement area where they had some art exhibits from some students who were doing some work there. And I asked questions because I had my own research, but I don't think if I'd just gone without the research, there wasn't a lot that I would have known about Jamaica. I mean, I saw the pictures, the paintings. That was it. So I think having somebody there who has some knowledge, or maybe training. You say the turnover is pretty frequent with the staff there, but just having somebody there who has some knowledge, or having somewhere you can go, maybe how sometimes you have the recorded tours around the castle, maybe including something on that, or having a video presentation would be helpful. But I also think that absolutely having a time of year where it's highlighted, a time of year where, Jamaicans, descendants are there en masse and the history is highlighted. I think that would really do a lot. Having some kind of a festival there on the ground, something would do a lot.
I think that's a really, really good point. Very good points, Jackie, and it's so good to hear your reflection on it. I think the idea of the Jamaican descendants en masse is a really good idea. I once was invited to a wonderful get-together of pennants in North London, and there were about 250 people there, all called pennants. And it was just brilliant. It was so good. And we know we've had different people called Pennants, like Jackie Pennant came, and April Louise Pennant doing some work as well. And we're one of the things we're hoping to do. And Martha, I haven't had a reply yet from the National Trust to my suggestion that we hold a commemorative service in the chapel at Penrhyn Castle. And Martha, who's now ordained, congratulations on that, Martha, would be willing to lead a short service, and we can invite suitable dignitaries to attend that event. So yeah, and Garrick will assist with that. Obviously, I'm in Australia at the moment, but so that's another idea. So that would be really interesting. Garrick, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just picking up on the point that Jackie just made about the actual Penrhyn Castle itself. When you walk into Liverpool International Slavery Museum and you go into the transatlantic, you have got commentary, so you can pick up the telephone and you can listen to the stories. It's there, the audio is there. So maybe something like that would be appropriate for the castle. But at least as you walk into the castle, from the street as a public person who know nothing about the history, there should be something as you walk in, maybe on the wall or something, some way of sort of capturing the history of the castle, and that would explain how it came about, evidently. So I think that's something that can be developed. We can make suggestion to, you know, to the National Trust how they might be able to do that, because there already is, you know, good practice in other places that can be duplicated.
Very good point. Yes, excellent. Thanks for that then. Right, so I'm just going to, I made some comments. This is what I sent back. But one of the main things that I think that the properties should have is a local research group, so that an open and honest exploration can be undertaken of the property's history and how it was funded. So that I think would be important. Also, the National Trust volunteers need to be trained so that they can tell the stories. In North Wales, we haven't got a large community of people with Jamaican heritage. In fact, you can almost count on one hand, can't you, Martha and Garrick? It just isn't an area where there are a lot of people who could easily travel to or to work at Penrhyn Castle who've got Jamaican heritage. So we'd have to explore that. Yeah, that was the comment that I made about that. Right, so the local research group. Oh yes, the point here is that I've said other ideas, and I can fill this in with the ideas that you've been presenting. If we set up that local research group and link it with the Pennants Heritage Research Group in Jamaica, then that would be a very good match. And we've been doing a lot of work with the Pennants Heritage Research Group. It's great. The Pennants Project, I won't go into the detail of it, but it's about building relationships and supporting links, and we've got that there. Now, is this a coincidence? Right, the Great Penrhyn Slate Quarry Strike, 1900 to 1903, was the culmination of several years of dissatisfaction and unrest in the quarrying industry. There was a bitter battle between Lord Penrhyn and the slate quarry workers, which ripped apart the community and changed this part of North Wales forever. A few illustrations there. Is this a coincidence? The tenants' strike in 1938 in Pennants was a culmination of 100 years and more of despair, dissatisfaction and unrest upon the plantations owned by Lord Penrhyn in the communities of Pennants, Clarendon, Jamaica. So the dispute centred on tenants' rights and conditions, and the response of the authorities was prompt with immediate action, and by 1940 it seems that the Pennants plantations were sold and passed to the British government in Jamaica by Lord Penrhyn. However, this must have been challenging because few of the tenants in Pennants would have been able to afford to purchase plots of land, or could they rent in another way? Did this rip the community apart? Did it? I think it certainly would have changed these parts of Jamaica forever, and for the good. So a coincidence, slate quarry, strike against Lord Penrhyn, and the tenants in Pennants also on strike with Lord Penrhyn's son. And we held one of these Black History conversations back in April to recognise the 85th anniversary of the presentation of this petition from the campaigning Pennants group to the Jamaican governor. And then more recently, well, this is now on the website of the Society for the Study of Labour History. We've got this information commemorating Robert Rumble and the tenants' strike of 1938. So that's a little write-up of it and the recording. Okay, so you might have missed some things over the summer. I missed loads. Hansid Publications are keen to work with us in future and for us to promote their great new monthly publication. I'll do more about that next week. There are going to be some Caribbean Labour Solidarity meetings on reparations, which is an area that we're looking at. So this is on Sunday, October the 1st, which isn't so far away. I'm sure it clashes with other meetings, but if you want information about this, let me know. I'm giving a talk to the TUC in Wolverhampton some stage in the month about the tenant strike. Okay, I'm going to nip past that one. And then Black History Month 2003, we're saying it's Black History Work in Progress. We might well say that it's our shared history, work in progress, or whatever other terms, because at times, you know, it's not useful to talk about Black history. It is our shared history. It's world history, and we need to be careful as we do things. Anyway, just to say, the Centre for International Study of International Slavery, they're doing things for Black History Month, so you can look that up. There's so many things in my inbox about what's happening. I can't share them all. But I thought that I'd share something Australian. Just to say that the National Gallery of Australia has handed back its 9th century Cambodian sculptures that it believes were stolen. So it was interesting, wasn't it, to hear about the British Museum not even noticing that loads of stuff had been stolen. So obviously can entrust museums, can't we, to keep our stuff safe. Anyway, so this was an interesting article that came up in Our Guardian. The 2023 Windrush Caribbean Film Festival, the Best of the Fest, is back. So that's something to look out for as well, going on during the month. And also this caught my eye, the Barrel Children, Families Windrush Left Behind. We've done some research sessions about the Barrel Children in our work on Windrush, and so it'll be interesting to see that. But it costs £19 to watch, so I'm thinking about it. And also, closer to home to us in North Wales, now this is free, okay, and 10 weeks working with and they're going to make it possible to join online, but all work in Colwyn Bay Library to explore the stories of the Black students who studied at the African Institute in Colwyn Bay, and that's and it's going to be a really interesting development. So that's that, and then we've got various other things to follow up. This is your story we were talking about earlier, and there they are, proudly putting. I couldn't believe this story. I couldn't believe it, because I hadn't paid attention the first time round that I read something about it. I just assumed that the plaque had been on the wall forever, and then realised that this plaque had been on the wall in Brecon only since 2011, I think, or something. And so I followed it up to look up some of the newspaper things, and there it is. I mean, for goodness sake. Anyway, we'll see what we can do to assist with that little campaign. And oh yes, these are my research bits. And the York Festival of Ideas, there's going to be something about the rise of the East India Company, and we don't talk about that in Black history. We don't talk about the crimes of the British Empire builders in other parts of the world, and maybe this is something we should do. So that sounds interesting. That's a little while ago. And just to say as well, we've got a colleague here, Jim, who knew Enrico Stennett very well, and his wife Mary, and we managed to have a little service of recognition in memory of Enrico and Mary, and we've dedicated a bench. That's friends of Enrico and Mary which is one of the activities we did over the summer. Well, I just am so impressed by the fact that you've all hung on this long. Thanks so much. Rosemary, did you want to add something?
Yes, I'm just, thank you for showing those slides. Thank you at the end about the Phillips plaque. I really appreciate you took the time and trouble to include those. Thank you. That means a lot to me.
Okay, and I'd really like to do more on this story, because we have, over the years that we've been doing Black History Conversations now, it's been good to have networked people, and we have seen progress in areas. So maybe we can help you, Rosemary, and I'd very much like you to carry on being involved with supporting what we're doing, and we'll support what you're doing. Lovely. Okay, so right, I think that's about it, isn't it? Anything else?
What's the time now with you, Liz? 12 o'clock?
I'd rather not mention it, but it's the wee small hour morning.
I just want to know how many hours ahead, because
I'm all right. So
what's the time?
1 something in the morning.
Okay, well, when you got time, look at my email, because I had that meeting with Daniel about the podcast last night, but I was looking for your email. Yeah. Okay.
We were looking at trying to make some of these conversations, particularly over presentations, do them as podcasts. It's 2:10 in the morning here, everybody.
What to your bed, man. Good night. Good morning. Love you. Yeah. One love, everybody.
Go sleep, Liz.
Thank you, Liz. Go sleep.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Today. Go sleep.
Okay, one love. Bye.
Bye. Go sleep, please.
Thanks so much, Vivian. Thank you so much for
Go sleep. Go sleep.
Oh, you've survived it, Coy. Well, I thought it was a good session. It was kind of
go sleep.
Got a lot.
Yes.
Too much coffee is not good for you.
Yeah.
Too much coffee can't be good for you. You had too much coffee.
I've had too much coffee.
Yeah.
This is true. All right then. All the best then, and thanks a lot. Thanks then. Bye.
Bye.